Hello guys, Professor O'Brien here giving you a short lecture on nominals. And we're starting on page 179 of the Rhetorical Grammar textbook, 7th edition obviously. Excuse me. Now, just as an adjectival is a word or a phrase behaving like an adjective, and an adverbial is a word or a phrase behaving like an adverb, and nominal is a word or a phrase behaving like a noun. The point being that you don't have to have a legally defined noun to have a noun. So drinking beer every day makes you fat. Now, you'll hopefully agree that that's a sentence of the form X causes Y, or X makes Y. What's X? Drinking beer all the time. Now, you would expect that to be a noun, wouldn't you? Because it's a subject. And yet, there's nothing obviously nominal about that phrase if you think about it. It's the action of drinking. Well, I'm going to argue that the word drinking there is a gerund. And a gerund is a verb behaving like a noun. It's a nominal. So for that reason, I'm going to tell you that you can have verb phrases and indeed anything behaving like a noun. Okay. Now, I'm going to open here with a discussion of appositives. Appositives are typically noun phrases themselves, so let's take a look at the example that opens the appositive section there. Our neighbour, the deli manager at Giant Foods, used to own a restaurant. Now, you'll agree, I hope, that we kind of have two noun phrases there. Our neighbour and the deli manager at Giant Foods. Now, this might well bring us back to the discussion of the foreshortened relative clauses that I was claiming lay behind things like participial phrases in our discussion of adjectivals. Wouldn't it be possible to put a who is there? Our neighbour, who is the deli manager at Giant Foods, used to own a restaurant. The third example there also, you could do something similar. Jack London's novel, The Call of the Wild, was serialized, etc., etc. What about this? Jack London's novel, which is called The Call of the Wild, was serialized in the Saturday Evening Post. I'm not even sure if that's a genuine appositive, but we'll keep it. Now, the interesting thing about appositives is, unlike relative clauses, they can be jumped forward to the front of the sentence. So that first example we gave, the neighbor who was the deli manager, etc., you can put the appositive at the start of the sentence. An ex-Marine who once played professional football, the security guard, I'm sorry, it isn't the same example. However, the idea is the same. The security guard, comma, an ex-Marine who once played professional football, etc. And we can take the appositive phrase and move it forward. An ex-Marine who once played professional football, comma, the security guard at our school makes us feel very secure indeed. All right. What do appositives do? For the most part, they're providing a little bit more information about the subject, and in a way renaming it, as the text suggests, 1/3 of the way down page 180. All right. Now, There are two sentences that introduce a curious facet of this, two-thirds of the way down page 180. Our friend Blaine works as an EMT in the mountains. Is Blaine an appositive there? Text suggests yes. And the second one, the judge's husband, Maury, stays home with the kids. Now, you'll note in the first sentence, Blaine is not set off by commas, but in the second sentence, Maury is. Why? Well, it's pretty clear that we have more friends than Blaine. So what we're doing is we're restricting that quantity to a single person, our friend Blaine. Our friend Blaine works as an EMT in the mountains. On the other hand, the judge does not have more than one husband. All we're actually doing there is providing more information about him, his name in this case. Now, if we take out the appositives, you'll see more clearly what the difference is. Our friend works as an EMT in the mountains. Yes, but which one? The second example, the judge's husband stays home with the kids. That's fine. Maury was just a little bit more information about him. All right. Now, you might not have been told this before, but I'm going to tell it to you now, as the text is telling it to you on page 182. You can often interchange the colon and the dash. So, take a look at the examples at the top of page 182. I'll never forget the birthday present my dad bought me when I was 10, colon, a new mountain bike. Now, look at the other example immediately after it. I'll never forget the birthday present my dad bought me when I was 10, dash, a new mountain bike. I like what the text says there. You could think of the dash as an informal colon. Fair enough. Why use a colon, however? Usually, if you're going to introduce a list. There's a nice example there. 3 committees were set up to plan the convention, colon. Program, finance, and local arrangements. Those are the names of the 3 committees. Now, if the 3 committees have long names, which have commas inside them, to separate them or to set them off from each other, you'll use semicolons. And you'll see an example of that in the sentence beginning the study of our grammar system, 2/3 of the way down, page 182. If you want to set off an appositive series in the middle of a sentence, use 2 dashes, one to introduce it and one to close it again. And again, several examples there at the bottom of page 182. That rule is repeated in the shaded box at the top of page 183. And there's an important observation in the second shaded box that I cannot overstress. The colon that introduces an appositive is preceded by a complete independent clause. Now, I'll give you 2 examples. They're at the bottom of page 183 there. The committees that were set up to plan the convention are, colon, program, finance, and local arrangements. Now, what's wrong with that sentence? The problem is, if you take the material out after the colon, what's left is not a standalone sentence. And you have to have a main clause, a standalone sentence preceding the colon. So you'll see the 2 fixes. One fix for those at the top of page 184. Use something like the following. The committees that were set up to plan the convention are the following, colon. Program, finance, and local arrangements. There's a nice easy exercise on page 184 to illustrate these problems with appositives and to get you used to using colons and dashes and semicolons. Do that exercise. It's worth doing. Now, for what it's worth, I don't like sentence appositives. And what they mean here is noun phrases that rephrase what happened in the sentence. There's a nice example at the top of page 185. The musical opens to rave reviews and standing room only crowds. Dash. A smashing success. It works, but it sounds a little slapdash to me. So I'll just draw your awareness to sentence appositives. Some people like them, others don't. I don't like them. I'm not saying don't use them, but they're there. Now, verb phrases that behave like nouns. I gave you an example already. And indeed, this section opens with gerunds. Let's see. Well, it opens with a discussion of gerunds. Let's look at the 4 examples provided at the top of page 186. That is to say, gerund phrases in all 4 places where you would find nouns in sentences. Number 1, subject complement. The worst part of the airport security system is taking off your shoes. Taking there being a gerund. Number 2, direct object. I enjoy jogging early in the morning. Jogging is a gerund. Number 3, the object of a preposition. My biology professor often begins class by telling weird jokes. Telling there is a gerund. And finally, an appositive. My dad's hobby, comma, collecting stamps, comma, can be time consuming. Collecting, again, a gerund. Now, when to use a gerund? Well, an excellent example is when you're using an it cleft and you don't quite know why. So go halfway down page 186 and you'll see the it cleft there. It is difficult for most writers to draft a 10-page paper in a single evening. Let's get rid of the it cleft. Drafting a 10-page paper in a single evening is difficult for most writers. Sounds nice. Now, we were looking at dangling participials in an earlier lecture. You can also have dangling gerunds because you must remember, if you have a gerund phrase in a sentence, it must agree with the subject of the main clause. Let's go, just move slowly up from the bottom of page 186. You'll see an example of a dangling gerund there. Having finished his college degree, the idea of traveling abroad appealed to Jason. Now, hopefully you'll recognize that the subject of the main clause there is the idea of traveling abroad. And therefore, the doer of the action in the gerund phrase, having finished his college degree, is going to be the idea of traveling abroad. Now, the idea of traveling abroad cannot get a college degree. How would we fix this? We'd make sure that the receiver of the college degree is the same person who's traveling abroad. So you'll see a fix just above that. Having finished his college degree, Jason decided to travel abroad for a year. Good. Basically, that's what the shaded box on page 187 is saying. When a phrase with a verb form opens the sentence, and this could be an infinitive, a participle, a gerund, or a gerund in a prepositional phrase, the subject of that verb will be the subject of the sentence. That is to say, the subject of the main clause. Okay. If the gerund is being performed by somebody and you want to name that person in the gerund clause, you typically put it in the possessive. So 3 examples at the bottom of page 187. I objected to their arriving in the middle of the meeting. I know you might be tempted to say, I objected to them arriving in the middle of the meeting. Their arriving is considered more correct. I'm not saying it is, but it's considered more correct. My objecting didn't make any difference. I think that sounds a lot better than me objecting. There is no point in your coming if you're going to be so late. Now, remember what we have here is the gerund and the person doing the action of the gerund in the same phrase. And when you have that person in there, they must be in the possessive. Page 188, infinitives can behave as nominals as well. You can have a gerund phrase like remaining neutral on this issue is unconscionable, or you can have an infinitive phrase which says much the same thing. To remain neutral on this issue is unconscionable. Why use infinitives? Well, experiment with them and find out. Why would you use an infinitive over a gerund? It's going to subtly change the style. I can't tell you how and why. Situation is everything. Situation is critical here. No harm to do exercise 34. It will help you identify gerunds and infinitives. And remember, some of those ing forms aren't necessarily gerunds. John is eating, for instance. You see eating there as an ing form. It's not a gerund. It's a present participle. Okay, nominal clauses. Now, let's take the following sentence. He knows something. Now, hopefully you'll agree something is a noun. Now, what about the following? He knows that I am planning a military coup. Now, I've replaced that noun with an entire clause, that I am planning a military coup. Entire clauses can behave as nouns. That's the point. You can take a noun out and replace it with an entire clause in certain situations. They're almost always introduced by the word that. And you can move them around the sentence. That is to say, you can have a nominal clause behaving as the subject of the sentence, as we see 2/3 of the way down page 189. That the common cold is caused by a virus has been clearly established by science. Okay. Now, we can add a slight level of sophistication to nominal clauses by putting them into the predicative position after an it cleft. So look at the top of page 191. It has been clearly established that the common cold is caused by a virus. It was a shock to us all that Marie dropped out of school. In this case, we have an it was, etc., stop opening the sentence, and you remember that it is a dummy subject. It is clear that John is a very intelligent student. That John is a very intelligent student is what the it is referring to. So all we're doing is we're delaying the subject. Why use an it cleft? Well, again, it's up to you. It might have a great deal to do with style. you might want to hold off on that information. It might be brand new information that you want to hold off till the end of the sentence. It's up to you. It's all about style. Okay, so that completes our discussion of nominals. I hope you picked up something from that, and that you will provide whatever homework I asked for in this subject, and we will talk at greater depth during our upcoming meeting. Have a great day.